Yo guys, what is up? Max on a Borderlands 4 video, and today we're going over my Rocket Witch build. Now, this is a build that I started out testing as a full like Eldritch Blast Incarnate skill tree build. They buffed a bunch of like Eldritch Blast damage, and we were using the Technomancer class mod that converts your action skill damage, or not converted, adds ordnance damage to your action skill, and we were trying to just use our Eldritch Blast as our like main source of damage. And however, we ended up having to like scale ordnance damage because it was dealing ordnance damage. And then I was like, wait, we could also just use ordnance. And then it was like, holy crap, Vex can use ordnance really well. So this build kind of went from being an Eldritch Blast main damage build to now it's kind of like an ordnance damage build that is using Eldritch Blast for a bunch of utility and buffs. However, this is a build that just does a ridiculous amount of damage. It bosses, it mobs, and it does some really, really cool things, and it's a setup I haven't heard of really anyone using, so I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. Let's get right into it. So let's do an overview, and I guess the first big question to answer is, how do we have infinite ordnance ammo on Vex? Because we are not playing Amon, and we're using a few things to do that. The first big node is Icy Attunement. Attunement kill skill. While Vex is attuned into Cryo, killing an enemy restores ammo and ordnance cooldown. Effects persist for a duration after attunement is switched. So basically, anytime we kill an enemy with our ordnance, we get 20% back right into our mag of our ordnance. And if we're killing a bunch of enemies, we get just constant new ammo fed to us, which is really, really nice. Now, the other thing that we're doing is we're using Witchy Trigger Finger. This reads that dealing damage with Eldritch Blast or Phase Explosion will fully refill ammo of Vex's current gun and grant a stack of Witchy Trigger Finger, increasing gun damage for a duration. This is huge because now we have just passive ammo restoration for our ordnance, and we also have a button that if we're at 1 ammo, we will get all of our ammo back. So there really isn't like a easy way to run out of like ordnance, for example. So just to like show you, for example, if I was to shoot all of this rocket, and I'm not getting ordnance back right now because we're out, or we're not killing things. But right now I have 2 ammo. If I Witchy Trigger Finger, 32 ammo back. So you could just spam these out, stack your gun damage, and constantly upkeep your ordnance, do a ton of damage, get a ton of buffs. And the other thing that we're using with this build to stack up a ton of damage is the Teen Witch class mod. Now, this reads when Vex has max health, her lifesteal partially applies to shields. When Vex has maximum shields, her lifesteal partially grants overshield. This gives us a lot of survivability on the build because we're basically always going to be at full shields, full health, and full overshield. But it allows us to also use amp damage. This is a Watts for dinner. While we have overshield, we get bonus shock damage. One issue that the build was having prior to us making some adjustments is we were stuck using Cryo Ordnance, and then if we were going against like shields, for example, we would just be dealing like 50% less damage. So with the Watts for dinner, we get bonus shock damage. Shields are no longer an issue. And with the Teen Witch class mod, we're able to buff up pretty much all of our shots with amp damage and this gun damage from amps applies to our ordnance. So now our ordnance just hits way harder, and we get a bunch of survivability, and we get bonus damage, and we kind of like ignore the like weakness of cryo damage, which is shields. So it's huge for us, and this is kind of the like idea of the build. We're able to spam our ordnance, we get a ton of survivability, we're amping all of our shots, and we don't run out. It's a very, very cool setup. So now let's go over our skill tree. We're putting 5 points into Volatile Essence. This gives us 40% splash damage while our action skill is active, which is super nice. We had some extra points, which I put into Grave Sights for the stacking crit damage, and we also pick up Grave Implements. This is a ton of gun damage. Gun damage on ordnance builds is so good. It's better. Gun damage is literally better than ordnance damage on ordnance builds because of the specialization full spectrum arsenal. Ordnance damage now benefits from increases to gun damage. Ordnance damage gets 50% of our increases to gun damage. However, if you're using a gun ordnance, aka a rocket launcher or like a Gatling gun, you actually get 100% of your ordnance damage increases to your gun damage. So anything that says gun damage increases with that node, instead of getting 100% of the buff, we get 150 or 1.5x. So for example, one stack of this would give a gun 20% damage, but for us, we're going to get 30%. So it's absolutely huge, and it's going to allow us to hit really hard. And VEX gets a ton of gun damage buffs. So this is awesome for us. We also get Grave Power so that we can stack even more of Grave Implements. And then we get down into our red tree. I don't have any actual points into Conjecture, just my class mod specking here. This is nice to have. It's extra gun damage at full shield and some extra damage reduction at low health. We're not really ever at low health, so just a little bit more gun damage for us. Then we're picking up Grave Vitality. This is going to give us health regen and max health capacity. Once again, we want to be at full health and full shield so that we can get that constant like overshield and constantly amping all of our shots. And then we get to something that I did not know works for VEX, which is incredibly powerful, and that is Blood is Power. Blood is Power gives us bonus kinetic damage with our guns based on our current lifesteal while our health is full. We are permanently in our action skill in this build. It does not go away. And we get double lifesteal effects with Essence Leech. And then now our ordnance is dealing cryo damage, kinetic damage, and shock damage because Blood is Power is going to give us bonus kinetic damage. Just to give you an idea. As you can see, all of those shots are dealing bonus kinetic damage as well. So that is a ridiculous amount of extra damage for an ordnance build. And when we realize that this works, that means that this skill also works. In Enhancement gives us more bonus kinetic damage while our action skill is active. We also pick up Grave Sustenance so that we can constantly kill enemies and get our action skill duration restored, as well as Hasty Fiends for some extra movement speed and damage reduction. We are an ordnance build. Ordnance builds move a little bit slower, so picking up some movement speed, some nice quality of life. I put 2 points into Claw and Bang for some extra ordnance damage. Not like super important, just kind of trying to get down to our next thing, which is Icy Attunement. Whenever we kill an enemy, we get ammo restored back for our ordnance. And then our class mod is giving us points into Grave Thirst, which is giving us even more lifesteal. For our weapons, it doesn't really matter. I just like using high damage things to like get us out of fight for life or get some kills if our ordnance ever does go down. So I keep some like beam tossers on me, some spread launchers, and also the hot slugger. Just high damage weapons can kill things without like, I mean, honestly, we have a ton of gun damage on this build, so like your guns are going to shred anyways, but just things to get you out of fight for your life if you need it. For our rep kit, I either like the Kill Spring. Kill Spring's really nice because we're overkilling enemies really hard, and this gives us healing orbs, which will feed even more healing into us. Make sure that we're always getting that like amp, because that amp on all of our shots is really, really nice. Also a triple bypass. I don't have one on me right now, but if your action skill does go down, oh yeah, here. Triple bypass, just click, 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 and then boom, your action skill is fully back if it does go down. For class mods, the Teen Witch is, in my opinion, best in slot for this style. There are some class mods that give her buffs to her, like ordnance damage and things like that, but nothing's going to allow us to amp all of our shots like the Teen Witch will allow us to do. We're going to be using the Watts for Dinner as our shield. You don't need a Watts for Dinner. Technically, any shield with amp will work. The Watts for Dinner is just kind of the best choice, in my opinion, because we get the bonus shock damage and it can roll amp. For your enhancement, we're rocking your like actual enhancement perk doesn't really matter. You're just looking for like really gun damage and gun splash damage. Gun fire rate does not affect ordnance, so kind of useless there. Just look for gun damage and gun splash damage. And then for your actual ordnance, the only real requirement is that it's cryo. You do need to use cryo ordnance on this build. The two that I've found that work the best are this dead spread. Important things are that it rolls two shot, fires 2 rockets at a time, and also personally I like extended mag so that we get a bigger mag. It's just a less kind of micromanagement to make sure that we don't run out of ammo. And then for like the big damage, I was using a hail spike. The important rolls on this launcher are to get Merv and 2-shot. There's an interaction where these rocket launchers, Merv rocket launchers, that split into multiple orbs will do so multiple times with high caliber because they will hit an enemy and split on impact. And then when they hit the ground, they'll split on impact. And if you can get this where it fires multiple and Merv, then you get tons of projectiles. Merv plus homing is also really nice so that all the projectiles are going to be always hitting enemies. And this with high caliber is a ton of damage, particularly for bossing. It is a little bit awkward for mobbing because these projectiles, when they hit, split so many times that it can be quite difficult to like avoid the self damage that it can proc. So for the most part, I like using a like 2-shot Torg cryo rocket launcher for mobbing, and then I'll use the like hail spike for bossing just because it hits so hard and hits so many times. For our firmware, as I mentioned, we're using high caliber, just helps a ton with bossing. And then the other bonus I went was with airstrike, gives us more splash radius and more splash damage. The splash radius will help those like overlapping Mervs hit our targets, and then splash damage is just quite nice to have. For your specializations, this is a build that would love a ton of specialization points. Currently, I am spec'd down to full spectrum arsenal for the big gun damage buffs. Riddle you this is another 50% gun damage, so like 75% ordnance damage for us. And then we also pick up Daredevil, now with caffeine, just for the action skill cooldown. This is just quality of life. If your action skill does go down between areas, between mob packs, it's easier to get it back. However, for like extra damage, you could go fragmentation payload, so that when you do crit with your ordnance, you get a bunch of extra damage. Ordnance crits like a normal gun would crit. If you shoot an enemy in the head with ordnance, it will crit them. However, a lot of times we're like aiming at the feet with our ordnance because we're not trying to be overly precise. So I didn't find this super must-have, but it would increase your boss damage. Guys, that's going to do it for the build guide. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what kind of build you'd like to see next, and I will catch y'all in the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.